Associative memory. Why do I talk so much about associative memory? When you take into account that people's senses, their sense of taste, eyesight, hearing, all that is actually not processed at the point of perception out in the real world, is in terms of how we make up our perception. Everything's done in our brain. And take for our eyesight, for example. Your eyes gather light. That's what your eyeballs themselves, the lenses and everything, are for gathering light. And then they send pulses through the optic nerve to the visual centers of the brain, which are mostly located in the back of the brain. And there's three levels of, if you will, information dissimulation, where your brain is putting together the picture of what's out there. And the third level is associative memory. It literally is how we make an emotional association to the reality that we're experiencing. So it's very important to understand that your personality or your identity, your ego, is built out of your perception and is the way that you look at the world. So your beliefs, your emotional attachments to reality are your identity or your conditioning. So it's really important to understand that it's very, very mechanical. Associative memory simply is how you have an emotional attachment to an object of reality. For instance, a favorite color, food, your favorite food, things you dislike, how you believe, how you perceive, how we cherry pick information out of our perception that makes us feel good, and then don't look at information out in the reality or deny it because it makes us feel bad and we don't want to look at it. So something really simple. For instance, if you what kind of car do you drive right now? And then think about when you used to drive a car before that. Now, when you drove the car before that, you probably, while you were going down the road, you noticed other cars that were similar to yours. They were the same kind of car as yours. You notice how many of them there are out there. But at the same time, there are cars that are out there that you really don't notice. And then maybe you buy a new car and it's a different one from the kind that you used to have. You start driving it, and then all of a sudden, again, you notice that car that you're driving now, the new car. You begin to notice there's a lot of those out there on the road. Or, in other words, your subconscious mind is pointing your eyes in the direction of that other car. And the familiarity and the feelings that you have for those cars are the reason that you're looking at them. So your conscious mind really isn't directing who you are and how you look at the world. It's all coming out of your subconscious or your associative memory. So that's why I talk about it all the time. In fact, when I did a reread of Living with Enlightenment, the first book, I noticed that I talked about it in the preface. Then I talked about it again in the introduction. Then I talked about it very early on in the book again. And then in Jesus Was a Socialist, it literally is chapter 2. It's just about associative memory because it's so important to understand. In order to achieve a kind of freedom of your mind, in order to achieve that state of inner peace, you really have to understand what made you who you are today. So how was my mind, my memories, my personalities built one event at a time growing up? And of course, as an age regression hypnotherapist, that's what we work with. So I was standing at the hub of information and being capable of dissimulating that information, and through that, the epiphany of understanding stillness, what stillness actually is, and how it can reach beyond who I am. In other words, all of my thoughts, I project the meaning into. That's an easy thing to understand if you understand associative memory. So somebody who might be studying A Course in Miracles, they go through the lessons, the student's book, and right away, the teacher is trying to get you to understand that you make up your reality. You are the reason that you perceive things the way that you perceive them. And of course, in terms of being a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist, age regression is about associative memory, how we make emotional associations. And, and again, everything's stored in folders in your mind. It's like having a novel for every emotion that you have. It's tucked away in a library somewhere in your mind, in your subconscious mind. You don't know it, but the librarian is the ego, and it's handing out information the way it's organized your subconscious mind. So, in order to understand what is beyond your own warped sense of what information is and what information isn't, you have to go beyond your associative memory. So that's why I talk about it, and that's why it's so important. So in your subconscious mind, associative memory is just a simple link between an object of reality, say little puppy dogs, and an emotion. And we can understand that. So the color red and an emotion. And in your subconscious mind, those things are linked together. So when you see the color red, whatever emotional attachment you have to it, you project out onto the color red. The color red doesn't have an emotion, right? You project the emotion out onto it by the way that you stored your memories through the events, the emotional events of your past and how you grew up. You literally build your mind through associations. And then the ego comes, it's the birth of the ego is the age of 12 for most people. Some people are 11, 10, 9, whatever. There's always exceptions to every rule. But for the very most part, most people have, when they were growing up, made these emotional associations that created their identity and how they're going to react and feel about the world that they live in. And then at about the age of 12, they collected enough associative memory to build a complete identity, and that's the ego, and it blossoms into the world at that point in time, which is unfortunate for the person that has to go through it, because what you're attempting to do is actually remove the negatives of your life, and yet you can't. In conditioning, you can't do it through surface value information or knowledge or any of those things. You have to fix that linkage down there inside your subconscious mind. So for me, it was a natural thing as a hypnotist to use hypnosis to undo that linkage, the negative linkage, and the things that don't work for me and impede, the way I looked at the world. Of course, it doesn't hurt that A Course in Miracles actually it does the same thing I think to a lesser extent, but I had hypnotic help, so I used the power of hypnosis plus the kind of programming that comes out of A Course in Miracles, and then some, I guess, essentially thoughts of my own, how this should work given what I understand about reality itself.